So Small99 has got 5 key areas that really define our approach to net zero, and this informs all of our content, our advice, our guidance, everything. So I just want to talk through what they are and explain them a little bit more. The first and most important one really is momentum. Momentum is all about making sure you're constantly making progress and that you are embedding this change and this momentum in the core of your organisation. So one, it is changing how you make decisions. So rather than going with a supplier such as that is maybe a high carbon envelope producer, you change that to a low carbon one. And bringing even very small decisions like that into your everyday decision making is really how you're going to embed this process and this process and progress into your small business and really help keep that momentum and that change going. Secondly, it's don't try and be perfect. The perfect doesn't exist. The perfect solutions aren't out there. Even low carbon or like electric vehicles, they have their own problems. And there's never going to be a perfect technology to this. And you are going to make mistakes, and that is okay. As we go through this journey, we're going to find different technologies that maybe are more appropriate for different things. And it might be that a decision that is correct today might change it in 2 years' time. It turns out that paper supplier or that envelope supplier isn't as good as you thought, and you need to change them. And that's going to be okay. So really keep that momentum going, and that's why the decision making is so important. Finally, it's just try and be better than yesterday. That's a really key and simple message, I think, that people don't always understand is this isn't about getting to net zero immediately. It's not about being perfect immediately. As long as you're being better than you were yesterday in your business, that's going to get you to net zero eventually. The second one is then collaboration, and collaborate is really important. Collaboration means that you are bringing your suppliers with you, you're working with them to find opportunities to lower your carbon footprint and to maybe find other solutions. And it's important that you really bring them with you and you have these open conversations. And you might be surprised that they are also struggling with this, and therefore you can collaborate and work together to achieve a better result. If you're a small company, then working with others to influence change as well is really important. So because of collaboration, you might need to work with landlords, or if you're in like a retail unit, for example, you might have 3 or 4 of you. You don't control your energy supply, and therefore you need to work together as a group of people to put pressure on your landlord to change energy supply. There are loads of examples of this, and I think really just being open to collaborating with other business owners in your area is so key to really getting change and embedding it in the system. Finally, I think collaboration in terms of waste management, or not necessarily waste management, but just looking at your business and going, where are the resources sitting currently? And maybe there are some areas there that you hadn't thought of. So it might be that if you're throwing away quite a lot of stuff, that might actually be a resource to someone else that you can work with. And maybe there's a collaboration there which you hadn't necessarily identified before. Communication. So communicate is something I see most businesses failing at, to be honest with you, both on the side of they're not doing enough or they're doing too little. So again, there are 3 areas of this. One is be honest and transparent. It's as simple as that. Just say what you're doing and say what you're not doing. It might be that you're thinking there's some complex compliance around dictating your sustainability policy, but quite often it is just say what you're doing and what you're not doing. Really admit and own your challenges as well as your successes. It's important to define and admit that you can't change Amazon's hosting platform or your landlord's renewable energy supplier. If that's a no-goer, then you simply can't do that, and that is a challenge you're going to have to try and overcome in the long term. So admit that and share that with your customers and be honest about it. And quite simply, it's say what you've done, say what you're going to do, and say what you can't do. Breaking it down into those 3 sections really helps you understand and communicate effectively with both your customers and your suppliers if people are asking you on what you've done. So communication, I don't think you can over-communicate what you are doing in this space. The 4th one is reduce, not replace, and this is a really, again, and they're all important, I guess this is a problem, but this is a really common problem I start seeing, and a good example here is plastic bags, where people look at plastic bags in their business, they go, that's a pollution problem, I want to get rid of it, which is good, but then they replace it, so it's just simply with tote bags. Now, a plastic bag will have a carbon footprint of around 3 grams, a tote bag will have a carbon footprint of around 250 grams. So there's a huge disconnect there in actually the impact it's having. And just because something is plastic free doesn't mean it's carbon free, and it can actually be more carbon intensive. And that is why reduction of your consumption overall is so important. This goes for bags, it goes for energy usage where, renewable energy, maybe it's not always going to be there and it's a complex system. The amount you drive is going to be far easier and less impactful for you just to drive less than it is to get an electric vehicle, because there's still a carbon footprint associated with that electric vehicle. So don't try and rely on technology or new technologies to be a fix to the solutions. It's more important to change your behaviour, and to change your behaviour to be focused on reduction here in what you're consuming. As I mentioned, reduction is always the most impactful thing you can do, because it just removes the avoidance of doubt in that, is this the right or wrong decision? So I don't think reduction necessarily is not a negative either. This can often end up converting into cost savings, especially on the energy front, and just being a kind of more efficient and a nicer life generally if you're having to drive less, sit in traffic less, and if you're using less energy because your home is more efficient. These are all positives as well. It's not all about taking something away. Finally is budget, and this is a really important one to try and as a way to understand carbon emissions and to grapple with how you're going to approach this. So if you think of carbon as if it was a finite resource within your business and treat it accordingly, then you start changing how you approach different products, and it really is about, going back to the momentum side, it's really about changing the way you make decisions in your business. So if we say you've got a carbon budget of 10 tonnes a year or 100 tonnes a year, that defines a certain parameter within what you can actually use. So out of those 10 tonnes, say, do you need to drive to Glasgow and back from London? Because that's going to use, maybe 500 kilos of that total budget. So how can then, is that the best way to spend that budget? Could it actually be that you do that meeting on Zoom and then you spend that 500 kilos of budget somewhere else within your business? And if you approach every decision that you're making with this mindset of how are we going to use our carbon budget to really achieve the business goals that you want to, in the same way that you would with a financial budget. Money's not unlimited, carbon shouldn't be unlimited either. So in the same way that you're making decisions within your business on how much something costs financially, also introduce a question there around how much that's going to cost from a carbon perspective as well. And the data is difficult because it's not always there, but even just thinking in very simple common sense terms of, is this reducing our usage or is this actually encouraging an increase in usage? And an example of that, which again I see quite often, is that sometimes sales teams or the products you're selling, you're actually focusing on the high carbon products there, and you're incentivizing the wrong thing that is naturally trying to incentivize more consumption of carbon. So it's, how do you change that around? And maybe, do you incentivize sales teams to sell more of the low carbon product? Do you run promotions on your low carbon products and make them cheaper and more affordable? And just try and bring that idea of a limited budget of carbon and how you use that into all of your decision makings and behaviours, and how you're encouraging different behaviours as well. So just to summarise, the 5 approaches that we always recommend are momentum, collaborate, communicate, reduce, don't replace, and budget. Within these 5, the keeping these 5 in mind is how you're really going to apply it to different situations, and is going to help you achieve net zero in a very practical way, and make sure that every day you're taking those small steps towards net zero. There's not going to be a giant leap, unfortunately. It is going to be a series of small steps, and it is a journey that we need to go on. So make sure you start, and hopefully these 5 key areas will help you tackle the problem. Thank you.